I think that the occupations are necessary. While there's a genocide happening, we have to do what we have to do to put an end to that. And that involves disrupting business as usual. That involves making powerful people uncomfortable. And I'm really proud of every student on campus that was part of this action.
Welcome to Fight Back Radio, production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggle. I'm your host, Richard Berg, and today we have Chrisley Carpio, who's a national leader from the National Office of Students for Democratic Society. And SDS has been one of the main organizations, I think along with Students for Justice in Palestine, in being involved in these encampments and being a part of this national student upsurge to call attention to and to fight the genocide that's been happening in Palestine. And you'll hear from Chrisley about what the demands of the students are, what they've been trying to do, some of the repression that they've been met with. We also are going to have on this episode Rick Toledo, who's from Cal Poly Humboldt, which is a university in Northern California, up near Oregon, the very far north part of. And they've been had one of the more advanced actions, and they too were met with repression. And so, I think you'll enjoy this interview. It gives some depth to what's been going on our campuses. We've been, the students have played a leadership role, I think, in bringing the whole country along and exposing the genocide. And the world has seen what's happened over there, and they've seen the role of the United States government and of the Zionists in Palestine and what they've been doing. And we just need to keep pushing because this is unacceptable by any stretch. So here is Chrisley Carpio from the National Office of Students for Democratic Society. So I'm here with Chrisley Carpio from Students for a Democratic Society, or SDS. Welcome to Fight Back Radio, Chrisley.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Richard. I love this podcast.
We love having you. Actually, this is your second trip here. You were one of our early guests before we even had video. But there's a lot going on the campuses right now, and so Students for Democratic Society is in the heart of it, from what I can see. And so, can you tell us a little bit about the scope of these protests about Palestine, and what's going on with them on the campuses?
Yeah, absolutely. So the scope is massive. Lots of encampments everywhere. I can think of easily approximately 25 campuses where we either put on or helped put on an encampment, right, as part of the Popular University for Gaza movement, right, calling for disclosure of investments in Israel, divestment from Israel and weapons manufacturing companies. Yeah, just so many schools putting on encampments, private schools, public, state universities, community colleges, even high schools have seen walkouts. And we have SDSers everywhere, again, either putting this on or helping put it on.
Okay, and so has SDS grown through this whole process? I mean, there's clearly more students, becoming active right now than I've seen. I think I'm an old man, but in most of my life or whatever, since the old SDS days maybe. But so can you talk a little bit about the effect that these protests have had on student organization?
Yes. I think that it is extremely galvanizing. I think it's inspiring to the student movement to see these students boldly standing up for Palestine. And it's, making everyone want to come together and be a part of it. Nobody wants to be left out. I think SDS has grown massively because of it. Easily, at least a dozen new signups to start chapters, organizations wanting to join our network and affiliate. And I know that, we've been working closely with groups like, Students for Justice in Palestine, who are also growing. Young people just really want to be a part of this movement to say no to genocide. And it is it is strengthening the student movement, who in turn wants to keep this fire burning for Palestine, right?
Okay, so I want to go to a clip here of one of your SDS leaders at Cal Poly Humboldt, which is in California, and it's way north in California, north of San Francisco, close to the Oregon border, but it's the only major university up there, from what Rick Toledo, who we're going to hear from in a minute, tells me. But they were, the SDS chapter there, along with others, led a takeover of a building. And this is the first takeover of a building around the Palestine issue in the country. And also Cal Poly Humboldt was the first state school to do an action of an encampment or takeover of this magnitude. And it's pretty impressive. So I'm gonna go to the clip here, and then I'd like to hear your comments, Chrisley. So here's Rick Toledo from Students for Democratic Society at Cal Poly Humboldt. So Rick, how did the protests get started at Cal Poly Humboldt in California?
So this protest was a little unique in that there was no one organization that had organized it. It was that we had a lot of students here that were upset with what was happening in Palestine. They were tired of seeing the genocide day in and day out, and they had called an emergency meeting where many students from different organizations, some even without, some just individual students, gathered together and started to talk about how they could take an action for Palestine to help fight against the genocide and win divestment at our campus. During the meeting, it was decided that there would be a sit-in in Siemens Hall, which is the admin building for our campus, because that seemed to be the best way to strike at power and to really make a statement. And there had been sit-ins there prior for other causes. But we didn't expect the police response that we received. It was initially planned to be more of a peaceful action, but turned very militant as the conditions changed.
So, can you talk about that? How did how did the conditions change there? What happened exactly?
Sure. So at the start, it was planned to be a sit-in. People had brought board games. People were not expecting an extreme response. But when the police showed up, they immediately instigated violence against the students. And defensively, the students started to erect barricades, protect each other, create a line, link arms, and work together to prevent the police from taking them. They ended up barricading the doors and kind of banding together. As this happened, police violence escalated. More police from the sheriff's department showed up, heavily armed and in riot gear, and that encouraged the students to become more militant as well in defense of themselves.
Wow. So, and then how long did the sit-in actually go on? How long did this take place?
So overall, the occupation ended up lasting 8 days. The height of the violence during the struggle with the police, and when I say violence, I want to make clear that the police were the violent aggressors here. Students were in a defensive position, but the height of that lasted, I want to say, about 6 or 7 hours. I was there for the entirety of it, and it was a long struggle. We held out, and the thing that really helped students was that we called on the greater community and students to show up and put the word out that police were attacking them. And people showed up in mass to defend them. And we encircled the police and started chanting and supporting them and creating a defensive perimeter to try to assist them.
Okay, well, let's go back here a little bit then. So, okay, so you decided to have a sit-in. So you went to the building, you sat down apparently, took it over, and then how long were you there before the police actually showed up?
So students weren't there for long before the first officer showed up. I would say less than an hour. Okay. There was someone in administration that cited them and ran out of the building and called the police, and then it escalated from there.
Okay, and so but you had it for 8 days. So so from the time the first police showed up until 8 days later. It's that's a lot. I mean, and were you planning to hold the building for 8 days when you went there? Was that the idea?
The idea was to hold the building until graduation or until divestment was won. So there was no set time to stop. It was just, let's keep pushing this until we get what we need or we can no longer hold it.
So did you have plans for like for food and for, if you need to, study? Did people decide they weren't going to go to classes, or did people go to class and others covered the building during that time? Or how'd that all work out? How'd the logistics of this work?
So there was a lot of channels of assistance for food and things like that. We actually had this mutual aid kitchen that was local who came through and made food, not just for the students in the occupation, but for community members and other students on campus. It was an open kitchen. Also, you had Food Not Bombs who contributed. And beyond that, we had community members bringing supplies through channels that were created on Signal for assistance. So students would say, these are the things we're short on, and the community would show up for them and bring whatever it was that they needed at that time. For the classes, it actually was not planned that students would miss classes, but the administration decided to shut down all of the classes and the entire campus. And then they tried to blame the students in the occupation for the shutdown. Meanwhile, students within the occupation were encouraging teach-ins and working with the California Faculty Association to make sure that education was still happening. They petitioned the administration multiple times to say, we want you to have classes. We want campus to be open. This is a safe place. You are the ones making it unsafe. You are the ones shutting down classes.
Okay, so and you at the start of this discussion, you talked about how the police were ultimately were the ones that were violent. So from the time the first cops showed up, they were called right away. How did the police? What was the relationship with the police from start to finish? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the initial response was very aggressive, a lot of violence. One student had their head split open. I watched another be pulled out of a truck and thrown full force onto the cement. It was a very violent beginning. Once the administration called off the police on the first night, following that, the police just did patrols and would kind of watch things. They were always around the perimeter. They were always doing something. And this created a lot of paranoia and encouraged students to build more barriers and fencing to try to protect themselves. There was no escalation from the first day until the 8th day. And then on the 8th day, an army of riot police from all over the state. We're talking as far south as Channel Islands in Ventura County, which that's like a 10-hour drive from where we are. We're here. So they called in the forces, and there was an army of police in riot gear that confronted students at the end. At that point, there weren't enough students to continue to hold the building, and it was a peaceful surrender in the end.
Okay. And so, and the demands you said were for the university to divest from all business with Israel. And have they made statements about what their position is, or how's where are they at with where are you at with dealing with the administration right now?
So yeah, they wanted them to disclose, divest, and to put out a statement for a ceasefire. Right now, there was a ceasefire statement passed by the University Senate, and there was a vote within the University Senate for divestment. Unfortunately, it did not pass by one vote, and we started pushing for CSU-wide divestment. That vote did pass. So that would cover this school as well as the rest of them in our system. Unfortunately, because of the structure of the CSU system, there's a board of trustees who do top-down decision-making, completely undemocratic, run it like a corporation. It goes to them now. So it's all in their hands. So we have to hope that we caused enough disruptions to hurt their wallets enough for them to take action now. So we're all just kind of waiting to see. And if they don't go through with it, then there's going to be more escalations, I believe, in the future.
Okay. And then finally, I wanted to ask you about graduation. So you just graduated, right? You just got your degree, and you're going to be a graduate student there next semester. Can you talk a little bit about what graduation looked like at Cal Poly Humboldt?
Sure. So it was interesting because the campus had been locked down with police barriers everywhere, and they were arresting anyone who went in certain parts of the campus, even long after the occupation ended. So for many people who were told, well, we'll have a graduation on campus in this specific area and it'll be safe, they were terrified because students had already been arrested just for existing. Many people didn't want to go to that commencement. Many people stand with Palestine as well. So they actually had the lowest turnout for commencement they've ever had. And we held an alternative commencement with Humboldt for Palestine and Students for a Democratic Society. And it was in front of the courthouse with Palestine flags everywhere. And the commencement was all organized around honoring Palestinians. And it saw a very, very successful turnout. The only thing I would say beyond that is that I think that the occupations are necessary. As Israel escalates with Gaza, it's necessary, and Rafah, it's necessary for us to escalate as well. While there's a genocide happening, we have to do what we have to do to put an end to that, and that involves disrupting business as usual. That involves making powerful people uncomfortable. And I'm really proud of every student on campus that was part of this action.
Now you should be. So thank you for doing this. Okay, so that was a Rick Toledo from the Cal Poly Humboldt in California, and so he went into depth about what was going on out there. And I'm wondering, as I hear about encampments and stuff, it's a little different than a takeover of a building. Is the situation that happened in California with Rick, is that typical or is that highly unusual?
So I do think that the encampments are largely very militant, at least the ones that we've been experiencing. But I do think that Cal Poly Humboldt is special in how militant it was, where the students actually took a building. Because that's definitely less frequent throughout the movement. But that said, there's a lot about their experience that is sort of echoed across a lot of the encampment experiences, right? You have these students who are defying administration, saying we don't want the schools to be complicit in genocide. We want divestment. You have, in a lot of cases, the university sics the police on them. And then in so many of these cases, definitely the vast majority, you get the community coming out in outrage of what happens to the students, and then the movement getting that much bigger. And instead of, if the students are able to hold the space and keep the encampment alive, then more come and join and more keep the movement going, and the encampments return, or they get larger or become accompanied by community protests. So that's definitely something that is happening in a lot of places, while the encampments themselves, look very different. But yeah, I think Cal Poly Humboldt is special in that they were able to take a building and hold it and became a leading light in the movement, just like the Columbia University students did.
Yeah, no, that's you're right, and Columbia is what I think tipped a lot of this off at the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about Rick talked about how the administration canceled classes and took kind of extreme measures, and I'm wondering where the students have all they're most of these places are in tents on some grassy area or in a quad or something like that. What does it look like there? I mean, for those that are able to hold the ground for a period of time, what's going on here?
Yeah. So the experience is very diverse, right? So the students, they go to the quad, right? A big public place on campus. They try to set up tents, and they want largely the plan or the things that students aspire to do are kind of similar from the start, where they want to set up tents. They want to set things up so people can stay overnight if possible, bathrooms, food. People think about things like that, fundraising. They want to plan a lot of the times programs and teach-ins, right? Like, how can we continue talking about Palestine? A lot of people study for exams and things like that. What kind of creates the differences across all the encampments is definitely how the university, and by proxy, the police respond. Because, for instance, University of Minnesota SDS put on a massive encampment where the police arrested people right away. People were able to come back, hold the space, grow the encampment bigger. And the university ended up making an agreement with students where the students are able to negotiate further for divestment and even have, they got the school to disclose their investments in Israel, which was like, it was like crazy because there was like a list of like, oh yeah, the school's investing in like Tel Aviv Limited Corporation. It was just kind of
Oh
like,
my God.
Yeah, the students won that, So you have situations like that. University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, I think, was able to get their administration to kind of make concessions to them too, to the extent that the governor of Wisconsin was angrily saying that they would punish the president on Twitter and saying that they were going to retaliate. And then meanwhile, you have situations like across Texas, North Carolina, Florida, and, as the Humboldt student said, California administration cracked down really brutally on the encampments from the start. Like here in Tampa, Florida, the students on the first day of the encampment, as soon as someone took out a tent, they would get arrested. And 3 people got arrested trying to take out tents. Like they couldn't even get a single tent up. And then on day 2, the students managed to get 6 tents up, and they had over 50, I think like at its height, it was 80 students were locking arms around 6 tents, empty tents. Like nobody could go in there and do anything just to like get the encampment up. And they were able to keep the tents up for hours before the university had the police tear gas the students and shoot rubber bullets to the crowd. And they arrested 10 people that day, some of whom had felony charges now. So we couldn't sit on the quad and study in that case, but what is common across these experiences, and then I think Tulane University too, and Loyola University in New Orleans, where those are private schools, had similar experiences. I think the New Orleans students were able to stay overnight, and they had their encampment for I think around 2 days before it was brutally cracked down, also with tear gas by the city and the school. So obviously we weren't able to do what Minnesota, Milwaukee, Denver folks have been able to do, where they are able to kind of have the teach-ins for the week. But we were able to still try to build the movement, community support for the encampments, and the efforts to build encampments exploded after each time the students would try to put it on, and people would get arrested and people would try again. So all in all, it was still raising the issue of Palestine to a lot of people who maybe tried not to have an opinion before. It was, outraging the community. It was putting Palestine on the mind of so many people watching the news. So, even if we're not able to do teach-ins on the quad, I think we were all still, like Rick said, trying to disrupt business as usual until the schools gave us divestment.
No, that's good. It's inspiring. Let me ask you about the demands, and maybe I'll be using Rick as a barometer throughout this interview. But he talked about transparency and divestment, and a statement about a ceasefire were the demands that they had at Cal Poly Humboldt. Is that typical, or what kinds of things are people asking for? Are students asking for across the country? What do they hope to accomplish through this?
Yeah, so those demands are definitely pretty universal. So disclose the divestments, disclose the investments in, business that affiliate with Israel, and study abroad programs and other academic programs with Israel, any affiliation with them, end any business agreements, and investment in Lockheed Martin and Boeing are like kind of big targets that the students have. But then also saying, the university should come out in a national movement to end U.S. aid to Israel is a big thing that students are saying, as well as now adding things like amnesty for all the students who participated in the protests, as the university suspends people, evicts people, fires people, charges them with criminal charges. So now students are calling for the defense of, even their own protesters.
Yeah, no, that's good. Let me ask you about, I know the community have supported the students, and Rick talked about that. Here in Chicago, we saw just an outpouring of support for the students at Northwestern, DePaul, University of Chicago, and the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, which were the 4 encampments here. Is that typical? I mean, are people feeling the support from the community?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes, the students took a tactic of wanting to not necessarily say they were going to have an encampment, but to like kind of sort of storm the quad and, make it an encampment, or they would have a rally that would then turn into an encampment. But as soon as people even began to suspect in the community that someone was putting on an encampment, people would just like contact the students saying, please let us help you fundraise for the encampment. Here are tents that I have bought for you. I'm sending you tents. Here is food. Where can I send the food? When can I drop off the food? Can you meet me at 2:00? I have all this food, discounts from restaurants, even like discounts from bail bondsmen, because people knew that, okay, people could get arrested because of the way the police are reacting. It's just an outpour of support from the community. Everything from money to lawyers coming forward to community members themselves coming out onto the encampments. Massive support, all for Palestine.
I've heard also about, the professors. I know here at the University of Chicago, they did a press conference supporting the students during the encampment, especially as they were looking to and they've unionized the adjunct professors recently, along with the tenured professors. And so there's been, some of this, I just heard on the news, the new school, the professors did an encampment at the new school in New York City. So there's been some of that. I'm wondering, again, is that typical, or is that an unusual situation? How have the professors, and also let me ask you about, not the security, but the other workers on campus, there's food service and, janitorial people and all the, clericals, all the people that make a university go. How's the reaction from them been to the protests and the encampments?
Yes, I would say definitely positive from the faculty and from campus workers. A lot of faculty people have been getting arrested along with students, and getting cracked down upon by administration, and still, wanting to come out to the encampment. I think this has happened at Humboldt. This happened across New York City. It's happened in Atlanta. It's happened in a bunch of places. Just a lot of faculty coming out, or coming out and, organizing their own petitions. And certainly when the students reach out to the faculty, they come out in full force. It's not the same in all the schools necessarily, but like at USF, one of the groups that came forward pretty loudly was the USF Alumni in Tampa. Wow. Yeah.
That's fabulous.
The alumni came out before the faculty, which, some of us were like, wait, there's an alumni association, which is actually kind of important to the running of the school because they donate a lot of money. So now you have this big petition of alumni saying, well, I don't want to donate, do this. And then campus workers, same as the faculty, have been coming out and joining the movement, even at risk to themselves. Just the other day, I actually spoke to a campus worker who is about to get fired for her participation in the encampment movement. And, she said she doesn't regret it. She thinks that, it was 100% still the right thing to do. So I think that there is a lot of support across the board, and across the college campus life.
Yeah, I mean, clearly people are, there's a determination to stop this genocide across the campuses and throughout the communities. And so it's inspiring that people are standing up to our government and to the Zionists in this way. And it's very impressive. But they're being met with repression, and you've alluded to this a few times. There's been arrests. There's been Rick talks about the police cracking somebody's head open. Can you talk a little bit about the repression and what's happened, and how common is arrest, and what do these arrests look like? Are there people facing serious charges? Or I know there's been a lot of jail support here in Chicago for the students, and it's a lot of effort. You're spending sometimes 12, 15 hours in jail before you get in front of somebody that'll release you. And so could you talk a little bit about the repression and what that's looked like on the different campuses?
Yeah, so this movement has been so determined, like you said, and I think that the university administrators are very scared of this movement. They are terrified that they're being pressured to cut their ties with Israel and companies that support Israel. They really don't want people putting pressure on them. That the students have pretty much realized that if you attempt an encampment, you're going to be risking arrest, and people are choosing to do it anyway. And they're even choosing to, and it's not right. Like, the students aren't going onto campus and smashing anything up. I mean, they're setting up tents on largely public property. Even if it's private property, it's still like, okay, people like played like sports on the quad all the time. Like, they throw frisbees back and forth. Like, you can't set up a tent and study for exams, but the university isn't reacting, accordingly. They're, as soon as they get a whiff of anyone starting a popular university for Gaza, they immediately rush in to arrest people, and the students come back and, try to set up the encampment again. That is the response of this movement. I know the Minnesota students tried to set up in early morning, and then I think 9 of them got arrested immediately. And then students came back and set up an encampment while also trying to get those other students out of jail. And then this one was twice the size. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger every day. And that's the pattern. I think it happened across New York as well. It happened in Denver. People began telling each other things like day 2 is the most dangerous. Like, day 2 is when the police come, maybe they try on day 1, but they come with reinforcements on day 2, or they come with the tear gas or whatever, So, and the student's response is like, okay, prepare for it. Learn how to get this off your clothes, have the money ready to bail people out, have phone numbers, but we're going to try again, and we're going to keep on trying. And that's generally the attitude, is prepared for it. Make sure people know, that the arrest is likely, but then let people make up their own minds, their own decisions. And people largely say, I want to still do it,
So, what are they facing with this? So it's like, I know, you have some experience with this, because I know you were a member of the Tampa 5, and we had Gia Davia on the Fight Back Radio at that time, who was another member of the Tampa 5. And this is before the Palestinian uprising got to where it is now, but you were fighting for diversity and on campus, and campus programs and recruitment of black students, but you guys were arrested and were facing some very serious charges. So are we seeing that kind of thing? And there was expulsions, and I know you had a job at that time working at the university. They were trying to fire you. So is there a repeat of that kind of besides the arrests, or how deep does this go? What are the repercussions?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I would say it is very similar. And we've even had people locally and across national SDS, we've had people tell us, well, we saw what happened to you, and it prepared us for what could happen to us. And now people are using that knowledge because, people are getting not only arrested, but really, attacked by police. People are scrambling to find lawyers. Some people are getting charged with felonies. I would say that's definitely not as common across, there's a lot of arrests, but the majority are misdemeanors. But there are some cities where there are felony charges, and those are obviously really dangerous. And those people are definitely a lot of them are looking at 5 to 10 years, like we were, and now having to kind of do a protracted defense campaign. And there are a lot of students who were suspended. In the Tampa 5, the students didn't get expelled, but they did have these conduct hearings that were trying to get them expelled. And we had to do call-ins around all of them. That's happening everywhere now. There are students who were supposed to play in sports, and now they're not able to play in sports, or they weren't able to graduate. And there are campus workers who are getting fired. And I think in the case of the Humboldt students, some of the students worked on campus as well, and they got fired and they got kicked off campus. They were evicted out of the campus housing and now can't even use their food stamps because they don't have an income anymore. And I think this has happened in New Orleans too, almost trying to like punish, the university trying to punish in every way possible, not just with criminal charges, but, trying to kind of ruin your life. And, people are not caving either. People are not stopping. They want to keep fighting. They want to keep organizing for Palestine. A lot of people are, they're seeing the university administrators and kind of their education for what it is, which is you're told to have all these values about caring about the world, and then you're punished for actually exercising it. And people are choosing to kind of change their life because of it, saying, well, I want to keep doing this anyway. Like maybe I won't become like a rich like engineer, but I want to keep organizing for what's right. So it is changing a lot of people's lives, just like Tampa 5 changed, the life of myself and others.
Yeah, let me ask you a little bit more about that, because I know maybe this is the next phase we're going to be going into a little bit here. But first, let me give a shout out to the National Lawyers Guild. I know here in Chicago and probably throughout the country, they've just done a fabulous job of providing legal services to so many people who needed it and were just, found themselves in a police station, whatever, with lockup and not knowing what to do. They've also done a lot of trainings about, to tell people, don't talk to the police or the FBI without a lawyer and that sort of thing. But I remembering the Tampa 5 and your battles there. You didn't clam up. You waged. You didn't talk to the police, but you talked to everybody else, and you rallied your supporters and stuff like that. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about the defense and fighting the repression and steps that will be taken and support people will need going forward?
Yes, absolutely. We walked away from the Tampa 5 experience and we summed up that we thought there were 3 major things that we learned from it and that others should learn, which was one, we saw legal counsel and she had an aggressive strategy where she told, she said to the world, like, I think that they didn't do anything wrong and I'm willing to fight. I'm willing to fight for them. So we're, telling people as you go looking for lawyers, don't make sure that it's a lawyer who fights like you. And maybe they don't want to be an activist. Or, our lawyer certainly didn't want to go to any protests. So she spoke at a couple of them, but she phrased it as she would take the fight to the courthouse. And that's what people should look for: legal counsel who will actually take the job seriously and work hard, and not just try to get you to plead so that they can move on with their life, right? And see if you can get it pro bono. If you've got a lawyer who believes in you, there's a chance you could get it pro bono. None of these students have money. So the second thing is, be public and organize around your case and talk to as many people about it. The school tried to get me to keep quiet about getting fired. They tried to do the same with the students in the conduct hearings. The prosecutor at one point in one of the court appearances got up and told us that we needed to stop talking to press, which we thought was a good sign because he was feeling the heat, And we think that, the same way that we ended up in that position because we were organizing the people will come to our defense if we tell them what we stood for, say that we, did it for saving education, standing up for Palestine, it's ultimately not about the people getting charged, but it's about the movement and stopping attacks on the movement. So be public, use your real names, and, even like tell people who you are, tell them your bios. Oh, I'm an art student. Oh, I was a campus worker. Let people know who it is that they're like going to call for, so people do have to use their names, so I think that's important. And then the third thing was what was that? Was it to organize the people, aggressive legal counsel? Yeah, I think the third thing was be public with your information and your names. People need to know what's on the line. They need to know the charges. They need to know, how serious it is if you're looking at prison or not. Yeah, and who you are,
And this worked for you. This worked for you guys because you were facing potential. I remember 5 or 10 years in prison, depending which one of you we were talking about. So the fact that we're talking to you today is a reflection of the success of that campaign. So I think people who are facing that should listen to Chrisley Carpio. I want to ask you about graduation because we, right now school years are winding down. They're starting to have graduations, and it seems like whatever they knocked down the encampment, but the movement just kept rolling. So, can you talk a little bit about what graduations are looking like around the country, and what SDS is doing to help people prepare for graduation?
Absolutely. So 2 things are happening at graduations everywhere. Either students are disrupting it, right? Because the school has not divested yet, and the school did not get to keep bringing in millions of dollars that they'll just send to Israel. Or students are hosting people's graduation events, especially for the students who were not able to graduate because of getting for their participation in protests. I actually was, at one a few days ago, or they're doing both. A lot of schools are doing both. I know that in Denver, where the students had a very large encampment that I think went on for almost 2 weeks, they disrupted every Colorado University campus's commencement. And I know a lot of students have brought like Palestine flags and, kind of taken out, let Gaza live, like things from under their robes and whatnot, or just actively they'll disrupt the graduation. They'll organize walkouts from the graduation. And then a lot of students are putting on, the alternative graduations because, just because the university says that the students don't get to represent them, doesn't mean that that's what the people think. The people actually largely think the students are the best representatives of what the school should.
So I mean that's fabulous, and it's been getting a lot of press. I've seen some very creative things as well. I saw one university that were wearing red gloves for the blood in the hands of the university, and I saw one that wouldn't shake the hand of the president when they got their diplomas, and so it's been some really good stuff out there. But what's next? I mean, so we're running into the summertime now. It's it's a tough time to organize students, I'm guessing, during the summer when they're not all together at the schools. And so what's the plan? How do we keep this movement alive?
Great question. So at our last convention, a convention where we resolved to organize for Palestine, by the way, this was in October 2023 last year. At that same convention, we also resolved to march on the Democratic National Convention in August, and also to march on the Republican National Convention. So those were all 3 different resolutions that we made, and 2 of those are coming up this summer. Let me grab the dates. I think March on the DNC is
August 19th, I can tell you that, because that's going to be in my hometown, Chicago.
It is, yeah, I'll be seeing you, I'm sure.
So all the Fight Back Radio listeners, come to Chicago on August 19th. And I think, Trump is just a repugnant piece of garbage. But Biden doesn't, he tries to get by saying, I'm not Trump, and that might be his only redeeming quality. But if we're going to challenge U.S. foreign policy, I think we have to turn out in big numbers. And so far, I think too, it's working. It's all these protests. It's very clear to me that Biden is nervous, and he should be, because he's an imperialist dog that's supporting a Zionist genocide of people. So So there's my rant for the day. But yeah, August 19th in Chicago, and then just down the road from us here in Milwaukee, July 15th. So, and this is something students during the Vietnam War used the conventions and some of these tactics that SDS is using, the old SDS used to. So
absolutely, yeah. The encampments on the quad, bring hundreds of people out there, walk them out of class, occupy a building, don't give it up, and then march on the RNC and the DNC. And we're telling students, there's a lot of community groups that are holding actions for Palestine. Don't be idle this summer. Organize SDS contingents to them. Especially as things escalate in Rafah.
No, that's good. And so if if I'm going to be going to college next year somewhere, and I'm like, okay, how do I find SDS? Or if I'm at a college now and we don't have an SDS chapter, and I want to get something like this going, or want to connect with SDS, how do I do that?
Yeah, great question. So we have a website. If people go to newsds.org. You'll see our national website, and there's a button that says Join SDS at the top. We encourage people to start a chapter or join an existing one. You'd fill out your information, and we'll connect you to an existing chapter if there's one near you, or we'll help you build a new chapter if there isn't one near you, or if you have a student group already and you want to affiliate with National SDS, you just want to be part of the network. We're not going to have you change your name or anything, but we do want to organize with you. Sign up to be an affiliate. So that's on newsds.org. And then follow us on social media. On our Instagram, we are at National SDS. And then on Twitter, we are New SDS. So that is where you can find updates too about, our work in this movement and also other movements. And we'd love to march with you on the RNC and the DNC. So just connect with us, and we want to get you out there. We want buses. We want Genocide Joe to hear it from people's mouths themselves. To stop your ties with Israel.
So we're starting to run out of time here, and I've enjoyed doing this. But is there any message, anything we didn't say that you'd like to add here? Would be a good time. But also, if there's any message you want to send out to our Fight Back Radio listeners, now would be a good time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. I think Rick really stole the show with what he said that. Everyone who has been to the encampments or seen it, we're just so proud of all of the students coming out, and we're proud to be in this movement for Gaza. People are really doing everything they can think of to get the schools to divest, and building this movement and making people who didn't have an opinion before have to form one now, right? And I think, it's costing people their jobs, it's costing people kind of what they thought was what their education is for, but it's totally worth it. Like, it just is, it's tough to replace those things, but, everyone I've talked to is just really proud that they're in this and they don't have regrets. It's the right thing to do in this moment in history. And then there are some places that are still forming encampments, believe it or not, going into summer. So if you're in an organization, look for one near you, especially if you know of an SDS, and lend them your support, everything you've got and
Well, thank you for being our guest, Chrisley. You've shown that you walk the walk, and you're a strong leader and do the Students for Democratic Society proud. So thank you for being our guest on Fight Back Radio.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Richard, to tell our story.
So that was Chrisley Carpio, and also I want to thank Rick Toledo for being interviewed and having that little clip that we put in there. It's important that people continue to be active around this issue, and I think people are. It's like, continue to go to protests in your cities. If there's something going on in the campuses nearby, certainly support that. If you're a student and you want to form a chapter of the Students for Democratic Society, we're going to put in the show notes the information Chrisley gave you, so you can contact them if you need to. Also, I want to encourage people to come to Chicago for the Democratic Party National Convention. I think Joe Biden and the Democratic Party need to know there's a cost to just worse than turning a blind eye, funding a genocide. This is terrible. We need to stand up to it. And so August 19th here in Chicago, I hope to see some of my Fight Back Radio listeners there, and we appreciate that. Also, don't let the Republicans off the hook. On July 15th in Milwaukee, we'll be there protesting as well. So we hope people will see you there as well. But finally, I just want to give a shout out, as always, to the crack production team of Fight Back Radio, which does such a great job. Shane Tremley, Vince Olson, Natalie Pranis, and Dodd McColgan. And I'm Richard Berg for the entire Fight Back Radio team, saying until next time, all power to the people.